Yeah, free money, y'all. You know how it is. Beautiful day in the Tri-States. It's Sloan here on 700 WLW, and all eyes are on Wisconsin as we brace for possible violence and protests there. A jury starts deliberating the fate of Kyle Rittenhouse this morning on charges of first-degree intentional homicide, first-degree reckless homicide, attempted first-degree intentional homicide. Those are not good charges to face. 12 of the 18 jurors will be chosen. The other 6 will be alternates. And then yesterday, closing arguments happened as the prosecution defense made their final pleas to the jury pool. And it's not looking good in Wisconsin. Again, you prepare for the worst and hope for the best. I think that's a situation there with some 500 guardsmen on duty as well as law enforcement. All vacations are canceled in the Badger State as we look to see what happens there. And, of course, keep an eye, too, what's going on in Georgia. But let me bring in Jason Phillabaum, who's been our legal analyst and expert on the show. Jason, of course, a former prosecutor, now is in private practice. And, Jason, welcome again. And so earlier yesterday, you were on yesterday just updating the story. Judge Bruce Schroeder dismissed a misdemeanor weapons charge against him. That was one of the big hang-ups I think people had, is like, how can a 17-year-old have a long gun and that be legal in Wisconsin? The judge threw that whole motion out.
Yeah, good morning again. Yes, what's interesting about this case, and I think it sums it up the best, is it really made the prosecutor look like he didn't know what he was doing. Number one, he filed a count that was ultimately dismissed because it is legal for him to possess the firearm at that age. That's a long rifle. And what's interesting is on cross-examination, he asked the defendant, well, why didn't you buy a handgun? And the defendant says, because I wasn't allowed to possess a handgun. He goes, but you were the rifle? And he goes, yes, yeah. I was. And then all of a sudden the prosecutor's like, what in the world? And then in closing argument, he does the cardinal rule. He's showing the jury the firearm, the rifle, and he has his finger on the trigger. I mean, it really, if you know anything about firearms, you know that this prosecutor doesn't know anything about firearms. And he's trying to charge Kyle with charges. He knows, the defendant knows more than him, and then the judge ultimately dismissed the case. I mean, they just look bad from beginning to end.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't understand. Now, typically, if you think this case is a dog and you're the prosecutor, you are not going to prosecute it yourself. You're going to have one of your underlings. You're going to have one of the many prosecutors on your staff do it. That was the case here, but it looks like the prosecutors they have in Kenosha are utterly incompetent. I understand not having your fingers on it, and that's the case if you're the prosecutor because you want to get elected or reelected, as the case may be, but this isn't going to bode well for this guy.
Yeah, typically the rule of thumb is if it's a really good case and high profile, the elected prosecutor does it. Yeah. And if it's a really bad case and it's high profile, an underling does it. And I mean, the prosecutor made one good point in his closing argument, but everything else was just disjointed. It was almost like he was changing his argument on the fly. And at the end of the day, I think I heard someone that was in the courtroom say that one juror was trying to stay awake during rebuttal, and other jurors were kind of looking around the room and really not paying any attention anymore. And that usually is a very bad sign for the prosecutor because they've done checked out after the defense attorney sat down.
All right, so the prosecution is portraying Rittenhouse, now 18, then 17 at the time, as someone looking for trouble, right? So he provoked this. He brought the AR-15 style weapon, and there's debate over, assault style weapon, assault weapon, whatever you want to call it. It's a long gun he brought, which is perfectly legal in the eyes of the laws of Wisconsin. That he was the guy who provoked this thing. He said, when you provoke an incident, you lose the right to self-defense. You cannot claim self-defense against a danger you create, labeling him as an active shooter, and the defense brushed back on that.
Yeah, the one thing that I was taught as a young prosecutor is never, ever overstate your case. The moment you overstate your case, you've lost, because you've lost credibility. And so he correctly said if you provoke a fight, you can't really use self-defense. Right. That's the correct law. But then he turns around and says, but if you bring a gun to a situation, you are now provoking the situation and therefore can't use self-defense. And that is absolutely not the law anywhere in the country, let alone.
Well, that undermines the argument of concealed carry, right? Is it, if I have a gun on me and I react to a situation because I see someone reaching or someone doing something violently, am I provoking that situation just by me having lawfully having a weapon on me? It undermines the whole concealed carry Second Amendment premise, for that matter.
Exactly. And the moment he said that, he lost credibility. But then he goes even a step further and starts calling this guy an active shooter. And that is just, completely outlandish from when you look at the evidence. You can call him a number of things, but to call him an active shooter, it made him look desperate. It made it look like, he was absolutely overstating his case. And then the defense attorney was able to get up and he was very passionate in defense of that statement. And I think ultimately the jury's going to see that, and they're going to see that the prosecutor did get desperate, did overstate the law, did incorrectly state the law. And I'm expecting a result probably today.
And the prosecutor continued. He said in the second shooting incident that's when people confronted Rittenhouse because they believed he was an active shooter. And he said the crowd was right. The crowd was full of heroes. They did something that honestly I'm not sure what I'd have the courage to do. So basically he called the people that were chasing Rittenhouse, hitting him with a skateboard, another guy pulls a gun on him, as heroes. And I think if you contrast that to the jury, if you're the defense and say, okay, these are the heroes, and you show the burning buildings and the looting and the violence at the hands of those protesting the shooting in Kenosha, I think that illustrates to the jury where this prosecutor stands. I don't think that's going to go over well.
Yeah. Now, the other thing to realize is this is a jury made up of people from that city and county. And so they were there last year when their city was being burned to the ground, and that it was not being burned to the ground by heroes. And so you've got, the three individuals that were shot all had felony records. One was a sex offender. The other one had other burglary and domestic abuse. And these are the people that the prosecutor is calling a hero. And then the defense attorney did an outstanding job of breaking that argument down with the video, showing that Kyle was running from the situation towards the police so he could turn himself in. And you essentially had people come from 20 to 30 feet back and rush him to take him down. That he was not shooting at that point. He was heading to the police. And so when they called him an active shooter and they called that these people were heroes, it was an overstatement that I think is going to, completely destroy their case.
Well, the other thing, too, is there's no duty to retreat, I don't think, in Wisconsin when it comes to shooting, right? You can stand your ground there. But in this case, he clearly was retreating. Now you're chasing and attacking a guy who clearly is giving up at that point. He's no longer a threat to you. So you could use the same argument they use against Kyle Rittenhouse against the crowd, couldn't you?
Yeah, there's two very important things that you kind of said there with that retreat. Number one is the judge said that there is no duty to retreat, but if someone has the ability to retreat, them retreating or not treating does go into, whether or not they acted properly. And so you have him retreating. And then what I found most significant, and the defense attorney did an outstanding job at this, was there was a point where he gets hit in the head, punched, and he gets hit in the arm with a skateboard, and then another guy comes up to him and is about to attack him. He turns, points the firearm at this guy, and the guy backs up, and he does not shoot. And so that is, I think, what this case is about. He used force when he had to, and then when he didn't need to use force, he actually was very restrained. The guy got hit in the head, hit with a skateboard, and you had this guy rushing him. He turned, pointed, and the guy backed off, and then he essentially kept on running, and that's when he ended up falling over as he lost balance from getting hit in the head. So
and the prosecutor tries to make this case and saying they're trying to convince you that Rosenbaum, was one of the victims, was going to take Rittenhouse's gun and use it on Rittenhouse simply because they know you can't claim self-defense. But they have video showing the attack on Kyle Rittenhouse, and that, the one guy I don't know which guy it was, but one backs off. He shoots the other one because he's being assaulted with a skateboard. And then later, and even in court, the third man testified that he pointed the gun first at Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse shot. That's classic self-defense. So the idea that you lose self-defense when you're being assaulted with an object, it's not like people don't die all the time for being assaulted with things that aren't guns.
Yeah, and so the interesting point that I think the prosecutor did best was at the very first shooting, because you're right, those second shots are no-brainers. But the first one, video showed that he was being chased by this guy. He turned around, and about 2 feet away, he fired 4 quick shots in a second. Bam, 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 bam. It was that quick. And so the prosecutor basically said, number one is he probably didn't need to use deadly force at that point because he wasn't being attacked. He was just being chased. And secondly, he didn't need to fire 4 times. So the prosecutor sort of does a good job of framing that. And then in the very next sentence, he calls him a coward for not using his fist first. And I'm like, well, you just lost it again. I mean, you actually started making a point about, did 4 shots, was that too much? Should he have waited for the guy to get a little closer? That wasn't a bad argument, but the moment he called him a coward, again, it's like, well, this is politically motivated, and then the defense attorney jumped on that and attacked pretty hard.
Well, you could also use that defense against it's amazing how all this applies to Kyle Rittenhouse, but none of this applies to the people who were shot and the people who are attacking him, right? Because, all right, when someone's in retreat and running away and you still tackle him with a skateboard or whatever it is and try and pounce on him and take his gun, allegedly, I understand how that's not cowardice in action right there, right? Is you guys should, and now he's running away. Now we're going to physically attack him with a mob mentality there, or the looting and burning of stores, or whatever it is, can still be applied to the people that the prosecution is defending in this case, and this would be the heroes in the crowd who are trying to stop this active shooter, which he wasn't an active shooter. He was defending himself. That's different. Randomly shooting in a crowd is one thing. Shooting individuals who are trying to attack you is something entirely different. I'm sure the jury understands that nuance.
Right. I mean, I don't think that active shooting did anything other than harm. And, I mean, you had the defense attorney did a great job of sort of outlining what he was doing that evening. He went from one place to another, and then the Rosenbaum, the one who was shot first, there's a video of him lighting a dumpster. And then the moment he lit it, one of the other good guys came and with a fire extinguisher and put it out. Mm-hmm. And he immediately started yelling at him, "Why'd you do that?" And started calling him the N-word, started using the F-word, and was basically out of control. And then what happened next is they light another dumpster, and you have Kyle Rittenhouse coming up the street with a fire extinguisher in his hand, basically so he could put out this fire that Rosenbaum just lit. And then, that's when he started attacking him. And he threw something heavy at him. He actually threw 2 objects, and then he got cornered into a wall, turned around, and fired. And that's, they did an outstanding job of portraying Rosenbaum, who was a sex offender, lighting dumpster fires and attacking Kyle because he was trying to put it out.
Jason Phillabaum's on the show, defense attorney on 700 WOW, obviously talking about the Rittenhouse case in Kenosha, Wisconsin. A jury's getting that this morning after closing arguments yesterday. That's what we're talking about now. Expecting a verdict maybe later today or tomorrow, but we'll see. These things tend to not go as planned, obviously. It's the best guess you can have. It's like tossing a coin. We'll get into that, what your predictions are in a little bit. But on that note, too, though, one may go, all right, well, Jason, is it really... Is it a dumb argument from the Rittenhouse defense team and others, maybe like you just pointed out, going, well, it's not like he knew their criminal records when he was engaged in defending himself. Does that matter? Does it matter that he's a sex offender? Does it matter that he's got felonies? Does it matter? Does any of that matter at the moment? He didn't check the resume. He was just defending himself. Should that be admissible in court?
Well, it is to the extent that at the end of the day, what they were able to show is these individuals were not out on the street doing good. They were not protesting. This was not a peaceful protest. This was individuals lighting dumpster fires, causing violence, screaming and threatening people. And, again, it's not necessarily relevant to the point of, what Kyle knew at the time, but it's relevant to kind of paint a picture that basically you had a kid that was invited up to protect cars. He was cleaning graffiti, putting out fires, trying to disperse the crowd from, de-escalate it, and then you had these 3 violent individuals creating, essentially chaos and destruction. And so that's the picture that's painted. He didn't necessarily know what their background is, but he did know that Rosenbaum threatened to kill him and said, "Next time I see you, I'm going to kill you." And then sure enough, next time he saw him, he starts chasing him down, and he had to use his firearm. So I don't think that it's relevant to the point of self-defense, but I think it's absolutely relevant to paint the picture. And I think that's the defense attorney did a pretty good job of walking that line.
Well, if you're going to make these guys out to be heroes, and that was the language the prosecutors used, then okay, that brings character into play, doesn't it? If you use the term hero, that's an issue of character. Heroes versus enemies, I suppose, right? Would be the opposite of that. So I would think the prosecutor opened the door for that. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, when they said he was an active shooter being chased down by heroes, he immediately, in my opinion, lost the jury.
Jason Phillabaum, real quick here, only got like a minute or two. What's going to happen today? You expect again, I don't know if anyone's ever been right in guessing this. What's going to happen? It's kind of like elections, right? Even they're less than tell there. But if the jury comes back today with a decision, what do you think happens? If it's several days, what's it look like then?
Sure. The first thing I say is that the jury is the only one that heard only the evidence. We've heard other things, and so at the end of the day, they're the ones that make the decision based on what they heard that was admissible. So I think if they come back today, I think it's going to be a not guilty. Without a doubt, it seems a very clear-cut self-defense. If it goes in tomorrow, I would start to get worried if I were Rittenhouse. At that point, there's someone pushing for guilty, and there's obviously someone pushing for not guilty, and then it depends on, is it 10 for guilty or 2, or what is it? But if they come back today, I think you're going to see a not guilty. Tomorrow, I'm starting to get worried if I'm the defense.
Okay, fair enough. We didn't get a chance to talk about the Ahmaud Arbery case in Georgia. I think that's probably going to be a little bit behind this one, but I think that's also another one we most definitely should be keeping our eyes on, because that one feels a lot different than the Rittenhouse one for sure.
Yeah, that one is, I think, race issued, as well as you have all kinds of dynamics with people being in the courtroom that aren't part of the case, but then, affecting the case. And then I think you have a situation where that might have been a mistaken issue of self-defense as opposed to an actual self-defense. And so, there's a lot to unpack on that one, but it's very different than this. Race is not an issue. You essentially had a kid really acting in self-defense.
Jason Phillabaum, I'm sure we'll be talking the next couple of days, maybe tomorrow even.
Absolutely.
All right, appreciate you, buddy. Thanks so much. Jason Phillabaum on the show, 700.